Thank you. My name is Doug. I'm a recovered alcoholic. It's really good to see my dear friend Chris S. on the show here. Chris and I don't know. We traveled probably for about 10 years. Chris speaking, 15 years around the world. I mean, we were Europe and in Alaska, someplace near Alaska. I mean, that was like probably the coolest. And we've been spreading this message, and he still is. I got off the speaker circuit to give great people like Chris to continue to go. And my life has just been. I tell people this. I say, people are like, "Hey, Doug, how you doing?" I'm like, you know what? If it gets any better, I'm going to shit a rainbow. And I mean it. I mean, my life is just so unbelievably cool and good, and it's all due to Alcoholics Anonymous. I came in here once, and I celebrated 27 years in February, and I truly believe that the reason I came in here once was because I found the solution of Alcoholics Anonymous within 90 days, 92-ish, because I was about ready to go out. I was just not drinking, going to meetings, and boy, that was a nightmare. So I love hearing you're constantly saying that this is a solution based. I'm wondering if Chris Schroeder helped start this, but that is so what it's all about. It's all about the solution based, not how much I drank. All right, I'll give you one story. You ready for this? Airline pilots had to submit to alcohol testing. Breathalyzers, God forbid, breathalyzers started in 1995, January, because a bunch of Northwest pilots got caught drunk, and they were drunk flying airplanes, the jerks. And so there they wanted me to take a breathalyzer. Well, it used to be 8 hours from bottle to throttle, which means I couldn't drink 8 hours from bottle to throttle. Well, I kind of mixed that up a little bit and said 8 feet from bottle to airplane. So I never broke the rule. I was never drinking 8 feet with inside the airplane. Well, until that one day I kind of was. And I was actually in the cockpit at that time. That's a story for another day. So anyway, alcohol testing came in January 1st, 1995. And my wife looked at me, she goes, "Now you're screwed." And she was absolutely right. Like, how was I not going to drink? I mean, I had hangovers where I could blow a .127. You kidding me? Or 0.127. It wasn't a one. It was ridiculously low. And January 3rd, I had to go flying, and I hadn't drank in a whole day, like 24 hours. I mean, imagine that. So I took a drink. And with alcoholics, we have a 5-step process. When my wife takes a drink, it goes alcohol, formaldehyde. She gets an elusiveness. She's like, "I feel drunk, sir." My wife puts an A at the end of everything. "I feel drunk, sir." And it goes to barley and hops, water, and out, right? Not us. Comes in as alcohol, turns to formaldehyde, then goes to a codeine-like substance. And we were restless, irritable, discontent. And we could have the sense of ease and comfort, which comes at once from, yes, you guessed it, another drink, and another drink, and another drink, until we pass out, blackout, right? That was me. That was me. That was me. So that was January 3rd. I took a drink. I woke up February 1st. I was feces. I was bottles, blood. You thought I killed somebody. And I was shaking like a leaf. I didn't know what was up. I didn't know what was down, but I remember looking at the clock, so I could tell God when I die. It was like 3:25 in the afternoon, February 1st, 1995. And man, it was, all bets were off. It was done. And there was a letter that was next to my bed. that I literally picked up, and it was from my wife. And she says, "You turned out just like your father." I took the kids, and the kids were 3 and 2. They're now 31 and 30. And I just screamed at the top of my lungs. I didn't think I was going to make it through that one. And this peace came over me, this peace, like I've never experienced in my life. And this voice came into my head and said, "It's over, it's over, it's over," 3 times. And then all of a sudden it went, whoo, and all the pressure and vomiting again. It was terrible. So that is a God consciousness, a God experience. I have had one, and it was that day. So I've been on a pink cloud for 27 years. I hate when people say pink cloud because it's denigrating our God, right? I'm literally on a pink cloud for 27 years. Like, people are like, is life really that good? Yes. With brief moments of suckness, but yes, life is really that great, right? So how did I get there? Well, after 90 days in Florida, you pick up these trinkets, like these colored chips. It's like not riding a horse because you have a hemorrhoid. So we're not drinking. So they give you like these trophies. And so I wanted that 90-day trophy, and I got it. And I'm running out to go drink because I was going to go celebrate. 90 days, dude. I got 90 minutes. So I'm running out of this clubhouse, and this guy steps in front of me from Hoboken, New Jersey. Like, what is he doing in Fernandina Beach, Florida? And he says, listen, they used to call me genius. They said, and then roll their eyes. They said, listen, genius, if you're going out, don't tell anybody that AA failed you, because you never worked the program of recovery. Now, this guy was taking me to institutions. He was taking me, I was going to 4 meetings a day. I hated it. I hated you. I hated everything. Oh, it was terrible. And so all of a sudden, I wanted to strangle him. And he says, and he took this big book, and I can't even pick it up. It's so ripped up. He took this big book that's next to me, and he slammed it in my chest. He says, come over to my house on Tuesdays and Thursdays, 8 o'clock. 1 minute late, don't knock on the door. You lie to me once, you're fine. Got it? Go ahead, have a drink. And I literally pulled up the 5 Point Liquors. We have these liquor stores where you can have drive-throughs. They're great. So when you're too messed up to walk in, you can just get really close to the window, and pick up your gallon of vodka. And so I just sat there, and I sat there, and I sat there. I couldn't tell you how long. And I just said, it was a Saturday. I said, I'm going to give this guy. And I was, you ever see those people in the meetings? Oh, I'm sober. Damn, let go of the chair, champ, right? Oh, I'm sober. And it was bad. It was just bad. But anyway, I was dry. And I went over his house, 7:55. I made sure I was 5 minutes early. And he put this big book in my chest. And second edition, and we had this thing called the circle and the triangle. And I thought that was just kind of nice stuff that looked good on us, right? Earrings. But it actually has a meaning, right? Recovery, unity, service. And that kind of blew me away. And he says, being a retired airline pilot, I'm really good at checklists. The first officer says something, I respond, yeah. Something, respond, right? I'm good at that. And when I would follow that checklist, I never made a mistake. But when I was rushing to get back home, I would make mistakes. Not good for you, not good for me. But when I took this big book and used it as a checklist, it was amazing the results I got. So he gave me the circle and triangle. We went over, and he says, we'll go over this every week. So let's go over my circle and triangle for this week. Right. So on recovery, I did a written 10-step every night. Yeah, I do a written 10-step every night, right on the big book of page 86, 87. Right. You're probably like, this guy's a freaking loser. Get a life. Right. I have an unbelievable life. And I do an inventory every night. And I have a home group. I'm the intergroup rep. And I go to 2 meetings Saturday and Sunday. Saturday is my home group. Sunday is my, my wife's an AA widow on Saturdays and Sundays. I'm sponsoring people. I'm going to meetings. I'm doing events. I'm speaking, and mostly local now. I don't go around But that's the recovery part. I pray and meditate with my wife. I ask you to try that with your significant other. So we wake up in the morning, we set our alarm for 20 minutes, we put on meditation music. I read the 81 verses of the Tao Te Ching. We're Buddhists. I read the 24-hour day book, and she reads her Al-Anon book, which is on her tabletop right there, Courage to Change. And then we go into contemplation, and for 20 minutes, and we come out. Every night, every day, we do that, right? So I've done that all week. So the recovery part's good. Talk to my sponsees, they're all doing well. The unity part is meetings. I go to 2 a week. I went to 2. I was going to go to one on Tuesday. I wanted to check out this men's group. I moved to Boca Raton, Florida, from Jersey City, which is really cool. We love it down here. But my workout was so devastating. I couldn't get off the couch. So I missed it. But so I did 2 meetings. And then what I do for AA service, I had a home group meeting. And what else did I do? I did something else. Oh, I'm speaking here. Right. So I had a good week. So my week is good. So that's the way we used to go over it. And then he went over the big book with me. And when we got to the 4th step, he said here, after he got on his knees and did the 3rd step prayer, I didn't do it. I was atheist. So that God thing was no good. Thank God it was at the 12th step saying, having had a spiritual awakening as the singular result of these steps, right? I didn't have that. I was atheist. I'm a mathematician, aerospace engineer. I could prove to you how through quantum physics and how the universe was made and blah, 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 right? Now God is everything in my life, right? Everything. And so he said, voicing it without reserve, this was only a beginning. And he said, circle beginning. So after he got off his knees, after we read the 3rd step prayer, I just didn't go on my knees. He says, this is a beginning. How many of it people here heard steps 1, 2, 3, drink, 1, 2, 3, drink, 1, 2, 3. People don't get past the 3rd. So he said, okay, genius, this is what we're going to do. He says, do you believe that there's any time frames? I said, nope, there are no time frames. No. XYZ, who has 90 years, says, take it easy, laddie. Let's do 1 step a year. And he says, well, what do you think about that? I'm like, well, you kidnapped me. I didn't even want to ask you to be my sponsor. So that's why I'm here. I'd rather do it his way, right? 1 step a year. We're on step 3 and I've been with you for 2 weeks. I'm like, you're spinning my head. He says, all right, genius, let's keep moving. He says, next we launched. How fast is the word launched? So I called up my buddy, and he went to the Air Force, and he's flying F-15s. And I said, Billy, you used to call him Billy Bond. I said, Billy, how fast is it when they launch your ass out, when they sling it out? He says, you're 0 to 60 in feet. You're 0 to 170 in yards. And you're just pinned back like this. So I took that and I said, next we launched. Okay, I just got to my knees. It says you're done with step 3, and it says next we launch. So I guess that means my sponsor looked at me and goes, so I guess let's launch. Next. So he says, next we launch on a course of vigorous action. The first step of which is a personal house cleaning. And that just means inventory, right? We're going to clean our house. It says here, which many of us have never attempted. Like, no kidding. I can tell you your fault, but you couldn't tell, what do you mean house cleaning? I'm not going to do house cleaning. It says, though our decision to do the 3rd step was vital and a crucial step, it could have little, and let's just circle that, permanent recovery. Permanent recovery is used twice in this big book. People are like, oh, you can never have permanent. I'm like, well, let's go to the videotape, right? Look in the big book. On page 64, it talks about permanent. And in step 12, and working with others, it also talks about permanent, right? 2 times. But let's see what it says about that. Permanent effect, unless at once. Well, I don't know how fast at once is, but let's just take a gander. At once means like now, right? So my 3rd step could have little permanent effect unless at once. And then it says, at once, followed by a strenuous effort to face and be rid of the things that ourselves which had been blocking us. Our liquor was but a symptom, just a symptom. And he said 1/12 of the symptom. Step one, right? Talks about drinking. And our life became unmanageable, correct? It doesn't say anything about drinking after that. It's 1/12 of the 12 steps. He says, was but a symptom. So we had to get down to the causes and to the conditions. Therefore, we stated upon a personal inventory. This was step 4. So now I'm at step 4. In the big book, it talks about resentment. It goes right into the resentment. So I had 20 pages. 20. I had 20 pages of a 4-step. The 4th column had nothing. Nothing. It was just all your fault. Nothing was my fault. No 4th column had anything in it, right? So he loved it, right? So there it was. I had 20 pages of resentment. What about fear? What about the sex part, right? So as we're going through him explaining from the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, resentment was the #1 offender. It destroyed more alcoholics than anything else. From it stems all forms of spiritual disease. I didn't have to worry about that. I didn't believe in a God. That's what I said to him. Dude, I don't have a spiritual disease. I just don't believe in God. If you want it, we're good. It's not for me. So I said to him here, so then it goes on. He says, from it stems all spiritual disease, for we have been not only mentally and physically ill, we've been spiritually sick. That I didn't get. We have a physical problem that when we put alcohol in, we go that 5-step process, right? We have a mental problem that when we wake up, when Chris is vomiting purple on the side of a house when he's working, and the people next door are like, what? You think he may say, I have a problem. If you hooked him up, he'd probably say when he wakes up, like, oh my God, like I did. Oh my God, what did your wife looks at you? Do you know what you did last night? No idea. No. Right? And then you get hooked up and you're like, will you ever drink again? Never. I mean, I swore to myself I wouldn't. And then by 12 o'clock, never's too long. 4 o'clock, well, maybe not today. 5 o'clock, up here, right? That's what it's talking about, that mental obsession, the body craving mental. But now we have a spiritual disease. And this is what I learned. And this is where I thought I was absolutely screwed. We straighten out mentally and physically once we get the spiritual part set. Well, how are you going to get the spiritual part set if you're an atheist like me? He says, no need to fret, genius. Having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. You're on 4. Let's keep moving forward. So he showed me how to do that, right? He says, when the spiritual malady is overcome and straightened out, our mental and physical. All right. In dealing with resentments, we set them down on paper. And what he did is he drew me the paper as is discussed on page 65, right? So when you go to page 65, you see that it has Mr. Brown, it has the cause. And so he showed me how to do the 4-step. From there, he says, we went back through our lives, nothing counted but thoroughness and honesty. Okay, kids, this is the deal. When I have a sponsee in front of me, and I'm looking at his 40 pages of resentments, his half a page of sex, and his few fears, I look at him, I'm like, okay, pick up your resentments. And they pick up the resentment. I'm like, are you excited about this? He goes, yeah. All right, we're going to really nail it home, right? Yeah. I want you to tell me what you came here not to tell me. And that's exactly what my sponsor did to me. And I looked at him and they look at me, and then the lip starts quivering. And then the tears start coming down because there was something that I left out on my 4-step under the sex part that I was telling absolutely nobody. April 1984, Knoxville, Tennessee. No one was going to know. Ever. Right? And I left it out. I left that part out. Right. And whoever does the fifth step, I hope they bring up the 9 times in the fifth step that they say, are you sure you told us everything? Are you leaving anything out? 9 times. How much does this big book know us? Right. So there I am with a 4-step, and I left it out, and I knew I left it out. So that's when in the 5th step, he looked at me and he said exactly what I say to my sponsors. And I just let that thing rip. I let it rip. And he was the first person who ever knew about it. And he was like, that ain't nothing. And he told me his thing. And I'm like, dude, you're sick. Right. But it was a massive relief. It was a massive relief. It says, we look back, we got to be thorough and honest. I wasn't until he caught me. It talks about deep resentments, like deep. I had deep resentments against my father. I mean, I was a punching bag, broken nose, broken arms, broken, right? I was a little kid. And a lot of resentment there. Also about my mother, like, you know, why did my sister have to come down with a lamp and knock this SOB over the head? You know, why was my mother just standing there? Until I made my 9th step to my mother, did I find out. And after a while, I felt kind of empathy for the man. You know, he was this, like me, my mother said, happy-go-lucky, joyous guy. And then in 1941, he gets shipped out in February or 42. And, you know, can you imagine what that guy saw over in Europe? And he was there for years. Back then, you didn't come back home. I mean, and she said he came home an animal. It was a different guy. And so when I started learning about this stuff, right, on the 9th step, when I started learning, it was life changing. Like, oh my God! And then you watch some of these movies, these, you know, Private Ryan and the Band of Brothers, and you're like, oh my God! You just start feeling empathy. Do you see what I'm saying? It's really important that resentments gets looked at, but they fade away. It says resentment is finitely gray. We found that it is fatal, for when harboring such feelings, we shut ourselves off from the sunlight of the spirit. The insanity of alcohol returns, and we drink again. And for us to drink is to die. If we were to live, we had to live free of fear and resentment and anger. That is a tall, tall figure there. And if it's resentment, think about this. When you have resentment, are you thinking about God?
When you say your dad, you think your dad is as athletic as
you're not.
You know, there's shrimp dudes running around.
I think it's Ken. Kenny K. Anyway, so, you know, when you're thinking, when you have this deep resentment, are you really thinking about God? No, you're not thinking about God. I take that serious. I do. And I really have to get rid of that. I have to get rid of it fast. And that's why I do these daily. 27 years later, I'm still doing a written 10. Think about that. Like, I mean, who does that? Because I don't want to change, because my life is just absolutely so fantastic. If you go up on page 67, it says, we ask God for the help us show them the same tolerance, pity, and patience that we would cheerfully grant a sick man. So my sponsor had me sit there on that couch. He wanted me to get to my knees. I said, no. And every time I had a resentment, my father came up, I had to say a prayer for the son of a gun, right? That's the last thing I want to do. So everybody I had a resentment at, I had to say a prayer to. And the prayer is on page 67. I call it the resentment prayer. You know, we ask God to help us show them the same tolerance, pity, and patience that we would cheerfully grant a sick friend. When a person offended, we said to ourselves, this is a sick man. How can I be helpful to him? God save me from being angry. Thy will be done. I had to say a quadrillion times. I had so many resentments. And you know what? I don't know if it went away because I was so exhausted after that 4th step. But I really started feeling a part of you. And when it says here, where were we to blame? Where were we to blame in the fourth column? What do you mean, where was I to blame? He says the inventory was ours, not the other man's. When we saw our faults, we listed them. We placed them before us in black and white. Guys sitting there just thinking, am I mad? Do I owe any amends? No, you put it down on paper. I do the 10-step on paper because it makes it real, right? I could sit there and forget a million things. When you start writing, you put it on paper, it's totally different. They knew that. It says we put it in black and white. It says we admitted our wrongs honestly, and we were willing to set these matters right. And then the second thing they do in the next paragraph is they go to fear, right? And it talks about the fear that's bracketed in the big book when they talk about Mr. Brown, but it gets more detailed here on page 68. And it says, we reviewed our fears thoroughly. We put them on paper. Do you see kind of a running thing going here about the paper and the black and white? We put them down on paper. It says, even though we had no resentments in connection with them, we asked ourselves why we had them. Perhaps there may be a better way. So when I did the fear, I found out my whole existence was how I looked. And I don't mean physically, well, maybe physically, I don't know, but definitely how I looked to others, right? That was big. And after years of therapy with a professional, it all goes back to the family, right? Someone tells you enough, you're a loser and you're the scumbag, and you'll never have a good job. And you're 6. You believe them, right? Why would they lie to you? And so that really kind of opened my eyes. That was a big fear. I really never had fear of not having money. That wasn't I was a fear people may find out who I really was inside. I was feared I really would never love. Those are my fears. And then it says here, we remove our fears and direct our attention to what he would have us be. At once, we commence to outgrow fear. This is the great one. Now, about sex. And that's the one that gets everyone wrapped around the axle. When I started sponsoring women back in 2000, and I guess it was 4, with the permission of my wife, that was a game changer, right? You just don't say you pull yourself up by the bootstraps when you've been raped all these times, right? It's just, I heard shit that it just blew my mind. It gave me a better appreciation for women, but it blew my mind how low they went, right? And when it talked about the sex part, it says here, we needed an overhauling there. But above all, we tried to be sensible in these questions. I am not a therapist. I cannot give sex advice. I could give you statistics on how many people, when they were newly sober, started dating somebody and then went back out, right? Those statistics are pretty high. Why? Because you're taking away the focus on getting you better. You see what I mean? Somebody told me 2 sickies don't make a wellie. And it's really, really right. I dated once in AA. And I had 3 years, she had a year. It was just a nightmare. And we both worked the steps, right? And we were both sponsoring half of Charlottesville, Virginia. But for me, it just didn't work out. You add on being new. Woo-hoo! So when people work the steps with me, when they're praying and meditating, when they have a home group, when they're going out and helping others and sponsoring others, I'm like, dude, you want to get the speed cart on life? Go ahead. Have at it. Start dating, right? And then, every character defect known to man starts coming out, right? And it's different. Now, the person is praying and meditating, they work the steps, so they could live life. I don't get this year thing. If anyone can find it, year. What happens in a year? You can get a job, you can have sex, you can get married, you can have kids. I don't know. After 1 year, it's like, dink. Hey. when you work, it's not a time thing. I've sat next to people with 40 years. Their energy was so potent that I had to move from them, literally move from them. They'd never worked the steps. They did all this by the white knuckles. It was, I had to move. I could feel the energy, and it's this spiritual thing I have, and it's just, God, it's terrible. It's a inside thing, You're praying and meditating, you're working the steps, you got a home group, and you're sponsoring people. Go. Live life. Have fun, right? Ask Chris. I started the biggest nightclub restaurant in Charlottesville, Virginia. Hell, I bought a train station. I mean, people are like, what do you know about restaurants? I eat out a lot. They're like, what are you, an idiot? And we ended up building 39 of those and selling them to a private equity group. We crushed it, right? So go just live life, love life. It's like life is just so cool, good and bad. It's just awesome. And then, there actually is a part 4. And the part 4 here, whatever our ideal turns out to be, we must be willing to grow toward it. And I'll end with this. My sponsor had me write down 2 things. The top 10 things I wanted in a job, right? And then the top 10 things I wanted in a relationship. And I posted them up on my mirror. And he told me every day and night, I had to look at those and say, I'm worthy of this. When I went through the top 10 things I wanted in a woman, my then wife had 3 of them. She was 3 out of 10, right? I married her when I was wasted. Sweetheart. She's my best friend to this day. She asked for a divorce on my 1-year anniversary of sobriety, February 1st, 1996. I don't love you anymore. I want a divorce, right? But she was only 3. And my job, flying, was nowhere to be found. And I'm a captain of an airline. Not a good thing. You don't want to be flying with a captain who's not happy and does not want to be there. That was me. I did not want to be there. And so I started saying that I deserve this stuff. And you know what? Before you know it, I met my wife on an airplane that I was the captain of, flying to Rome, Italy, and she was going back home, and she was a passenger. She lived in Rome. And I pulled her up to the flight deck. And back then you could do that without being shot. Right. And I said to her, ma'am, you ain't going to Rome, Italy unless you give me a telephone number. Back then I had power. And she turned around, smiled, and walked away. She didn't give me her number. 3 years later, I found her in Charlottesville, Virginia. She had moved to New York. She had moved to Lancaster, Pennsylvania, Charlottesville. I was doing a business deal with her, the owner of her company, and she came in and we were like, what are you doing here? Right? Talk about a God thing. She is 9 out of 10 on my list. And you know the one thing I didn't want? I had 2 children. I didn't want any more children. She had a child who was 4. That kid's 25. He works for us in our hedge fund. Him and I are inseparable. He doesn't talk to his daddy. I've been trying to push him. He doesn't want to talk to. It's me. Right? So really, she's 10 out of 10. And then my job, I quit flying. Started a little company, got huge, sold it, but another company got huger, sold it to Goldman Sachs, took all that money. I mean, it was just like, and now I own a hedge fund. Like, how does that happen? How does that happen? It's because I was so laser focused on what I believed I desired, and I walked into it spiritually. The one key element was I never left the side of Alcoholics Anonymous. That was the key to my success. And being a little persistent son of a bitch too. But really, it's all about the God thing, right? It's all about the God thing. When I finished this 4th step, and I had 20 pages, I was exhausted. And when I finally finished talking to my sponsor about it, I went home for an hour. And it says here, God alone can judge us on our sex situation. Counsel with others is often desirable, but we let God be the final judge. And that's it. I'll give you advice. I'll give you numbers. I'll give you ideas. I'll give you my experience, but I'll never tell you not to do something. May not be a good idea, but I'll never tell you not to. If we are not sorry and our conducts continue to harm others, we are quite sure to drink. We are not theorizing. These are facts out of our experience. To sum up about sex, we earnestly pray for the right ideal. And that's exactly what I did. And I came up with my wife, right? We had listed the people we have hurt by our conduct, and we are willing to straighten out the past. And that's why you don't throw away your 4-step, because you're going to use that in your A-step. Remember that. Because when my sponsor was like, yeah, I went on the beach and I had a burning fire, and I'm like, great, now rewrite it. What? Let's go to page 70. It explains it specifically. It tells you specifically. It doesn't say don't go on the beach and burn it, but this is what we're going to use as the frame of our 8th step. Okay? It says, you have made a good beginning. You have made a good beginning. I swear to you, when I was finished with that 4-step, I had a peace that I had not felt in a long time. I still didn't believe in God. I had a peace, but I finally felt a part of Alcoholics Anonymous. And for some reason, I felt like I was going to stay with you. And here I am 27 years later. You know, there's a lot of people with Chris's time and my time now, and they disappear. They don't disappear because they are going out drinking, although maybe some do, but they disappear because I hear this often. I spoke at an old timers convention in South Carolina, and I talked to a lot of them, and I was hearing this. I don't get anything out of AA. And I would say to them, how selfish of a statement did you just make? What do you mean you get nothing out of AA? It's not about you anymore there, champ. It's not about you. It's about the newcomer and everybody else who needs help. 10 years, who have never worked the steps and are dying. 15 years. They're screaming and yelling and carrying on, and they've never worked the steps. We have to show them the solution. That is why I love talking on places like this, right? A solution-based. You know, I'm going to admit something to you. 3 weeks ago, I had a meltdown of a proportion. I don't understand why. I don't know. It happened on a Sunday. And I absolutely scared the bejesus out of my wife. And on that Monday, I was working out with my CrossFit instructor, who was also in the program 10 years. And he says, you know, I went and I talked to this guy, and his name's Eric. And I called up Eric, and I was just like, I need help. And I like need help now. And I went back into therapy, because what happens is AA takes you so far and you do inventory, but without the right questions, I'm suppressing shit that I totally forgot about. And all of a sudden it bubbles up, boom, right? It explodes. So for 3 weeks, I'm seeing this guy twice a week. That's how bad I want to find out, like, what is going on? You know, I sponsor half of Boca. I'm going to 3 meetings a week. I pray and meditate. I'm like this guru who should be meditating, and here I'm having meltdowns on a Sunday, right? The only reason I understood that I was having a meltdown was because I was in Alcoholics Anonymous, right? And so sometimes you just need a little extra boost, and I'm getting it, and man, it's like the sunlight of the spirit. It's just like, it's coming back out. God gives us all this great stuff, right? He gives us all this AA. He gives us this big book. He gives us a solution. He gives us Eric's for me in my life. And that is what a solution-based program will do for you, as it does for me. I love you all. I appreciate you. And thank you very much for letting me speak.